So at the beginning of kind of this lecture, we kind of started introducing this topic of elasticity through talking about being hired to like set concession prices at TFC games, right? So let's get back to that question now that we kind of understand what elasticity is, to think about if we were in that situation, how do we know whether we should raise prices or lower prices to increase our revenue? So we're going to start talking about price elasticity. These pens are dying on me. Price elasticity and total revenue. So let's talk about that now. So let's get back to that original question. So remember, let's just underline this. Remember, a price increase has two effects. Higher price gives you greater revenue per unit. More revenue per unit. But we know if we raise the price, our quantity demanded goes down. But we're decreasing the quantity demanded. So there's these two effects going on. So we're getting more revenue per unit, but we're selling less units. What happens to revenue is which of these two effects is bigger. Is the revenue gained per unit? Is that bigger? Is that effect bigger? The fact that we're making more per unit bigger than the fact that we're selling less of them? Or does the fact that we're selling less of them, does quantity go down so much that it doesn't matter that we're getting more per unit, we're selling so many fewer pieces of pizza or beer or whatever at our TFC game that our revenue actually goes down? Well, elasticity is telling us exactly what this is. So I'm going to erase this and we can talk about this relationship between total revenue and elasticity. Because elasticity is telling us which of these two effects is bigger. So again, let's imagine that we're thinking about raising the prices. Switch back to orange. So we're increasing the prices. You can think about these two effects. If demand is elastic, what happens? Well, remember, a 1% change in price is causing a greater than 1% change in quantity demanded. So if we raise price by 1%, quantity demand is going to fall by more than 1%. So there's going to be a fall in revenue if we raise price. And so the decrease in revenue from selling less units is greater than the increase in revenue from higher price per unit. So if demand is elastic, if we raise the price, total revenue will fall. Now it's going to be the opposite for inelastic. I should say is inelastic. That's supposed to say is. So if demand is inelastic, we're going to raise revenue by increasing the price. And so in this situation, why it's going up is that the increase in revenue from higher price per unit is greater than the decrease in revenue from fall in demand, quantity demanded, from selling less units. And so, I mean, intuitively this makes sense, right? If demand is inelastic, it means people aren't very sensitive to prices. We can raise prices and they won't change how much they buy that much. A 1% change, an increase of 1% in price is going to cause a less than 1% decrease in quantity demanded. So we have this relationship. And with this relationship, we can draw out, using a linear demand curve, this relationship between elasticity and total revenue. All right, so let's draw a couple graphs kind of on top of each other. So the one on top is just going to be a linear demand curve. So price, hopefully it's showing up still. I'm going to ink a little bit. Here's our demand curve. It's linear, right? So it has, remember we talked about how even this linear demand curve, if it actually drew it nice and straight, it has all those 5 classifications all along that demand curve. So let's imagine that we have this point where the elasticity equals 1. Remember, it falls as we go, so this is inelastic. Part of the demand curve here, up here is where eta is greater than 1, so it's elastic. Okay, and then we can draw another graph down here, which again is going to have the quantity on this axis, but it's going to have total revenue or total expenditure on this product, same thing, total revenue over here, which is price times quantity. Our revenue is the price we sell this good at times the number we sell, right? So we just said that if we raise the price in the elastic portion of the curve, then our revenue is going to go down. But if we raise the price in the inelastic portion of the curve, or if the demand for the good is inelastic, we're going to increase revenue. So the highest revenue point is going to be when we have a unit elastic point. So it's saying any point below this unit elastic point, we want to raise the price to increase revenue. But if we raise it above this unit elastic point, it's going to go down. The total revenue is going to go down. So this is going to give us a shape that looks something like this. It's going to be this kind of parabola shape where these points on the curve correspond to different points here. For instance, what I mean by that is at this point here, this is part of the inelastic point or inelastic part of this demand curve. And so what we talked about kind of 2 minutes ago on the last kind of board, that if we raise prices on this inelastic curve, our total revenue should be going up because this price effect is bigger than the quantity effect. The increase in revenue per unit from a higher price makes up for the fact that we sell less of them. So if we're on the inelastic portion of the curve, we want to raise our prices until we get to that unit elastic point. And that's where our total revenue is going to be maximized, right? We want be as high as possible on this, on the y-axis, so to speak. Let's say that we're at this point here. Well, this is on the elastic portion of the curve. If we talked about before, if we raise the prices, we're going to sell so many less that it kind of, the fact that our quantity effect is going to be bigger than our price effect. We're getting more per unit, but we're selling so fewer units that our revenue goes down. So we don't want to raise price if we're up in this elastic portion of the curve. But if we started lowering the price, now all of a sudden we're selling so many more units that it's making up that we get less revenue per unit because we're selling so many of them. And so if you're in the elastic portion of the curve and you start raising your price, you're going to increase, if you are on the elastic portion of the curve and you lower your price, your total revenue is going to go up. So, I mean, we see this in action a lot. I mean, this is only one side of the market. We haven't talked about supply yet, but, this is why those, insulin, they're jacking up the prices for insulin because the demand for their good is inelastic. And so their revenue will keep on going up regardless of kind of how much you're putting it up. It still seems to be going up and up because people have to buy the good regardless of the price change. So we see that with a lot of especially in the US with a lot of drugs.